So, Seasons 1 and 2 of the Eighth Doctor Adventures has mostly been a mixture of great and pretty good, and Season 3 lacks the same momentum. Well, for me at least. Some people actually prefer it. It wasn't bad as such, but while Season 2 had built on Season 1 in a different way, Season 3 just felt a bit like more of the same, but it was going off in a slightly different direction that only rarely seemed to hit right for me. You could tell this was where they were headed from the way Season 2 turned out, but I just felt it ended up sounding more like New Who at its most kid-friendly than New Who at its most profound. See, you heard me. I did just admit that New Who can be profound. See, I'm not a hater. Eat those words, damn it. Sheridan Smith and Paul McGann are still really fun to be around, that never changed, but it's probably the weakest run of the Eighth Doctor as of 2016. Some people would contest that with the Divergent Universe saga, or the last random clutter of 8 stories that came after that, but while the stories that are slated in the latter Charlie era I would agree do deserve the credit that they get, but stories there that did actually hit right for me, I think more than made up for its pitfalls. I know me being relatively kind to the Divergent arc and not so much to this one's not going to do me any favours. I mean, I'm still going to do it, I just thought I'd acknowledge that yes, I do know that before I start. The third series opens pretty well with Orbis, where we return to the Doctor, who since the cliffhanger at the end of Vengeance of Morbius has spent 600 years living on a planet of sentient jellyfish, helping them defeat an invading race of giant talking clams. Okay, I know it's seeming like I just go apeshit over ideas of their big, dumb, stupid and sci-fi B-movie enough, but I do actually like Orbis. I mean, yeah, it's goofy and corny on the surface, but I personally got its oddball Douglas Adams-ish sense of humour. And the whole thing kinda reminded me of Marvin the Paranoid Android's exile to the mattress swamps from the third Hitchhiker's book. I'd kinda say it's like Doctor Who done as a Pixar movie. It's a funny and silly setup with a lot of humour to it, but it's played just straight-faced enough for you to be able to take its plot seriously. Also, under the surface, it uses Season 2's cliffhanger as the basis for its plot rather than trying to wave it away early on in the runtime like so many season openers following a cliffhanger are liable to do. Which makes it pull double duty, and that was always going to be tricky, especially with a concept as corny as this. But I think it really works, and Sheridan Smith and Katarina Olsen as the Headhunter are great here as they go on the hunt for the Doctor and try and remind him of who he was. Although yes, I did feel the Doctor forgetting who Lucy is after spending centuries living among jellyfish was a bit too been there seen that. A character trait of 8 throughout the expanded universe appears to be suffering from constant amnesia. But Sheridan Smith was really good in this one, so I was never grinding my teeth at it. Also, call this stupid, but I just would have loved Celta as a travelling companion. The Doctor travelling around time and space with a massive talking jellyfish would just really underline the yes, he can literally go anywhere and meet anyone or anything. Yeah, it might have got old after a while, and yes, it's very cartoony, but just fucking picture that. Next up we've got Hot House, and it's the first of this season's Let's Revive a Fourth Doctor era monster, which worked when they did it last time with the Zygons, and here I just didn't really feel this one at all. Which is a damn shame, seeing as it's a favourite Bigfinish regular of mine, Jonathan Morris, behind the script, and also the Crinoid are probably one of the most underrated monsters in Classic Who. Seeds of Doom is well renowned, but you don't really hear people talking about the Crinoid as much as, say, the Zygons. Hot House plays out like a Daily Mail reader's most confusing fantasy. It's set in a future where a sort of Westboro Baptist Church-styled environmentalist organisation are inciting violence, and what they're doing is trying to stop man-made environmental catastrophe by kidnapping illegal immigrants and mutating them into Crinoid to lower the human population to just the white British folk. Fucking Christ, is that ludicrous. I do really appreciate Morris's love of turning facets of society on their heads and throwing caution to the wind about who he's going to piss off. As he did in one of Bigfinish's most controversial plays, Blood Tide, which is another personal favourite of mine. But for something that sounds like one of the most weird and deranged ideas possible, it's a pretty bog-standard cackling villain plot and plays out like a cut-down version of Seeds of Doom. Minus the elements of the Thing from Another World. Which is a shame because I usually really like Morris's stuff, and as said, the idea is weird and mental, but for something that sounds so notable, the only bit that actually stuck out to me was a rehash of the only bit anyone remembers from Alien Resurrection. Sheridan Smith is great as usual, and I like that she's given a lot to do in the story, so it does sound solid in theory, but it was a bit of a shame on the whole. The Beast of Orlock's up next, and I'm kind of undecided on it. The Doctor and Lucy arrive in the town of Orlock in Germany, where 20 years ago there was a spate of grisly murders said to have been carried out by a mythical beast, and the murders start up again when the Doctor and Lucy show up, and they investigate the local extraordinarily wealthy Baron, who lives up in a castle and conducts weird and mad experiments. It's the sort of traditional horror story alien mashup you'd have expected from the Hinchcliffe era. In the first half of it, all the old school horror elements are in place, we're in the 18th century, and it basically plays out as every classic horror story you can think of, sort of patchworked together. The Baron's a decent villain, but it's not really anything you've never heard before. But then, all of a sudden, when we hit the second half, it adds a Superman origin story kind of thing into the mix, goes completely off the rails, falls on the floor and starts babbling to itself about aliens. It is interesting, I'll give it that, and it does hit you with the out-of-left-field stuff right the fuck out of nowhere when you expect it to continue being the simple tried-and-tested horror story that you've been listening to. The rug being pulled out from under your feet is kind of done in a similar way to Stones of Blood, but strangely even more mental in this case. It is good, yes, it's very entertaining, but I'm unsure if I love it or just like it. Wirren Dawn's the second Let's Revive a Fourth Doctor era monster of the season, and while better than Hothouse, I just sort of think it's sort of good-ish. Kind of unenthusiastic about it, to be honest. The Doctor and Lucy run into some soldiers in the middle of a bloody war against the Wirren, and we do get an interesting standoff of cultures. It does do a decent job of being even-handed, the Doctor arguing to the soldiers that the Wirren have a right to exist, but at the same time, in order to procreate, the Wirren have to put their eggs inside of humans. Oh my god, Briggs, what the fuck's wrong with you? That's gross! Okay, yes, it is my fault for that mental image there, since it doesn't happen the way that I just implied it does. But, oh god, I think I'm going to be sick. I started liking this one a lot towards the middle of the second half, but the military characters just aren't exactly a whole lot of fun to be around. I mean, maybe I'm missing the point here, but the first part seemed to just be more like a retread of Starship Troopers, rather than a knowing usage of the sci-fi classic as an homage in order to tell its own story. The fact that the Wirren are also giant bugs doesn't exactly make the obvious comparison drawing any less justified. Don't get me wrong, it does have some nice ideas about it, and taking the Wirren and doing something a bit more loud and bombastic with them, rather than just someone suggests, hey, how about we do a Wirren story? And basically just doing the arc in space again, that would have been pointless. And this one does create an interesting alien culture subject to space racism by the military mindset, but it doesn't really do that much with that idea. I think if this one were a 2-hour monthly series story, I probably would like it more. Lots of aspects of the plot are good, but they're really underexplored, and I felt the atmospheric bits in the second half could have been a lot better if they'd been a bit longer. It's okay for what it is, though. Next up we got the Scapegoat, which is a bit of a deceptive bastard. It starts out really promisingly, but then veers off into a kind of boring direction that just sort of makes you go, okay. It might just be me suffering from weirdness starvation by this point, and was pleased to find a story where it feels like you're tripping balls again. But unlike the bits of the Divergent Universe saga that I liked, yes, Scapegoat is weird, but it's not really that meaty. It does sort of feel for the first part like we're back in a weird Zagreus dreamscape. It's really bizarre and creative and has a feeling of unreality about it. The Doctor and Lucy wind up in Nazi-occupied Paris. Or is it? Yes it is. I know, I was disappointed too. Where a family of people with the heads of goats kidnap Lucy and make her perform in a play where a man who can die and come back to life is made to perform every night for an audience. It's sort of this morbid little fairy tale about snuff theatre, and when you say it all out loud, it sounds to me like precisely the sort of thing that New Who should be doing. Because New Who does have more of a fantasy fairy tale vibe to it than most of Old Who and Bigfinish's monthly output. And I think New Who should be aiming more for an original Grimm's fairy tale than the Disney appropriations of fairy tales. Yes, New Who is a show for all the family, but I just think it needs to show a bit more teeth than it usually does. And I think this is one of those stories it could learn a lot from. Yes, Scapegoat feels like a fairy tale, but unlike lots of New Who, it's unafraid to be a bit ugly and intimidating. I do absolutely love it as an idea. The first half sort of feels like the kind of nightmare that you'd have when you were a kid. In fact, I actually remember having a nightmare about performing in a school play where they used a real guillotine when I was about 12. So kudos for giving me nightmare flashbacks, Bigfinish. I absolutely love being psychologically tortured through sci-fi fantasy. Now you've just got to make a play that can literally physically assault the listener with razor blades and killer bees, and sadistic fuckers like myself will be all set. But in the second half of the Scapegoat, this dreamlike feeling it had been keeping up kinda shatters, and it starts feeling more like a corny 50s B-movie horror. Not to say that's totally a bad thing, of course, because I do love me some corny 50s B-movie horror, but it's just a bit of a letdown given how the first part was going. I think maybe the loss of the vibe that the first part was giving me was because as more elements are added to it, and more explanations are given for the weird unreality of part 1, the atmosphere gets irreparably damaged. If it had been kept a bit more minimalist, I really think the Scapegoat could have been a classic. Next up, Bigfinish invents a new word again with the Cannibalists, which is a very divisive piece, and unfortunately I'm on the dislike side, which is a damn shame again because I want to babble on for fucking hours about how much I usually like Jonathan Morris's work, but unfortunately this is the second time in this video that I have to talk down about it. The Doctor and Lucy arrive in an entirely robotic city in the stars, where on the top levels of the spire, a group of robots called the Assemblers are waiting for humans to show up, because I can't remember, while on the lower levels live the Cannibalists, insane robots that fuck shit up. And the Doctor and Lucy are caught in a standoff between the responsible robots that follow orders and the aforementioned destructive killing machines. I see what he was going for here, as the Cannibalists came out around the time that Portal exploded in popularity, and robots with distinctive comedic personalities were very in fashion for sci-fi, and Morris's intense love of Douglas Adams is worn on this one's sleeve. And yes, I'm a huge Douglas Adams and Portal fan myself, so I should love this, but while all the ideas in there are great, the execution is what bugs me. I just felt its jokes were played a bit too broad, and the tone was incredibly light-hearted, and the characterisation is really over the top. Well, that's a serious understatement. The characterisation in the Cannibalists is so fucking over the top that it zooms about 80,000 miles over the top and flies into the centre of the fucking sun. I mean, maybe it was just the sadistic fucker in me that wanted a bit more black humour out of something called the Cannibalists. It just kind of plays out like a Saturday morning cartoon. That and this is one of those rare occasions where I felt like the production of it was what put me off. It's totally filled with lots of loud and abrasive robot voices and intense clattering sound effects. It's like a Swans album but played for laughs, which really should be a contradiction in terms. The Eight Truths is the first part of the finale, and it's the best episode of the series according to me. In a nutshell, it's basically Doctor Who does the South Park episode Trapped in the Closet. You know what, fair enough. If you're going to do something about a cult prophesying some sort of spacey end of days situation, Doctor Who's the place to do it. Basically, Lucy runs into Karen again, who claims the headhunter dumped her after the events of Grand Theft Cosmos, and she's got her life back together, in quotation marks, by joining a cult which Lucy's sceptical of, and then obviously she becomes indoctrinated. The cult then gains the public limelight after something weird and mental happens that they accurately predicted beforehand, and they claim that it's a sign of the apocalypse. And when it comes to who's actually behind the end of days and the space cult itself, it's time for another spoiler warning. Spoiler warning. Okay, it's the Eight Legs from Planet of the Spiders orchestrating a takeover of the Earth to get loads of people praising the Great One. Though given the next one is called World Wide Web and has a massive spider on the cover, that's probably not much of a spoiler. It does kinda make your heart sink a bit though. I guess it's just one of those cases where, given just how good the build-up was and just how aloof they played it in the who could possibly be doing this and why department, that pretty much any explanation would probably be disappointing. While it is kind of obvious throughout part 1 that the villain's going to turn out to be some kind of classic Who villain, because why else would you be so aloof about who it is if it wasn't going to be some kind of twist for the fanboys listening? But this was just one of those cases where I just felt really let down by it doing exactly what I expected it to do. The Eight Legs do fit into the story and what it had set up, yes, and the reasoning behind it does make sense, but because part 1 had been as good as it was, and after hearing part 2, you kinda do notice how it follows the exact same framework as the last two EDAs finales. Build up, build up, build up. Oh my god, it was an old Who villain all along. Yet the fact these plays are Bigfinish's attempt to ape New Who's style didn't exactly become any less blatantly obvious with time. I mean, I did enjoy World Wide Web's Earth being taken over by spiders. It does do a good job of making you feel the scale of the problem, a lot more so than Zygon Invasion from Series 9 of New Who, particularly because of the decent job that Part 1 did in terms of world building. Yes, I did buy into it, but I just felt it could have thrown us a few more curveballs here and there. I would recommend this finale, yes. Eddie Robson very rarely fails to write a fun and engaging narrative. I just felt it wasn't quite as strong as he usually is. So yeah, that was Season 3, and I think my fatigue with it was mostly down to it essentially just being more of Season 2. Not necessarily a bad thing, of course, but Bigfinish thrived on experimentation for so long, and this one felt a bit phoned in to me. While their initial purpose to rework the 8th Doctor adventures for a more New Who-centric audience, to get more of that audience exploring outside TV canon media, was a good intention, but for lots of Bigfinish's older and more pretentious audience like me, they strayed a bit further away from what we initially came to them for. This one kind of made it obvious that you can only write in someone else's style for so long before you have to start doing what you're good at and mess about with the established order of things again. And fortunately, that's exactly what Season 4 does. See you next time for that. Probably won't be so fucking long a wait this time.